The Dog That Hated Christmas. Written and read by Shan McFadden. Mr. Jones had a big, mean old dog named Thunder. Thunder didn't like to be petted. Thunder didn't like to be brushed. Thunder didn't like to go for walks or fetch a ball or play in the park. In fact, Thunder didn't like anything, but Mr. Jones loved him anyway. Mr. Jones bought Thunder a big fluffy dog bed, but Thunder didn't like it. Thunder hated his dog bed and preferred instead to sleep in the cold, dark basement. Every morning, Mr. Jones would make Thunder a big bowl of dog food. Then he'd open the basement door and call out, "Good morning, Thunder. Time for brekkie." Thunder would slink up from the basement. He'd look at the food, then he'd look at Mr. Jones, then he'd glare and stare and bare his teeth and go, and then he'd swallow his meal in one bite and skulk back down to the cold, dark basement. On Thunder's birthday, Mr. Jones dressed up like a clown. He baked Thunder a big birthday cake and bought him some balloons and a present that was all wrapped up with a big red bow. Then he opened the basement door and called out, "Happy birthday, Thunder!" Thunder stomped up from the basement. He looked at the cake and the balloons and the present. Then he looked at Mr. Jones and he glared and stared and bared his teeth and went, Then he tore his present to shreds, popped all of the balloons and swallowed his cake in one bite. Then he skulked away back down to the cold, dark basement. And Mr. Jones said, "Oh, Thunder, I guess you just don't like birthdays." On Valentines Day, Mr. Jones dressed up like Cupid. He made Thunder a big pink card that was shaped like a heart, and he bought him some flowers and some very expensive doggy chocolates. Then he opened the basement door and called out, "Happy Valentine's Day, Thunder!" Thunder lumbered up from the basement. He looked at the card and the chocolates and the flowers. Then he looked at Mr. Jones and he glared and he stared and he bared his teeth and went, Then he ripped the card to pieces, stomped all over the flowers, and swallowed the doggy candies in one bite. Then he clumped away back down to the cold, dark basement. And Mr. Jones said, "Oh, Thunder, I guess you just don't like Valentine's Day either." On Easter, Mr. Jones dressed up like a big pink bunny rabbit. He made Thunder an Easter basket filled with delicate painted eggs, and he bought him a lovely Easter bonnet. Then he opened the basement door and called out, "Happy Easter, Thunder!" Thunder plodded up from the basement. He looked at the basket and the eggs and the bonnet. Then he looked at Mr. Jones and he glared and stared and bared his teeth and went, Then he smashed the basket to bits, crushed all of the painted eggs and pooped all over the bonnet. Then he tramped away back down to the cold, dark basement. And Mr. Jones said, "Oh, Thunder, I guess you really don't like Easter." Mr. Jones tried the same tactic for Thanksgiving, Halloween, and Hanukkah, all with the same disappointing result. Each holiday, Thunder would destroy the lovely gifts Mr. Jones had bought for him before retreating to the cellar. Over time, Mr. Jones became very sad and discouraged. But on December the 24th, Mr. Jones awoke with a renewed sense of hope. "Oh, why, it's almost Christmas," he squealed. "Everyone loves Christmas, and I know just what I'll do." Mr. Jones decided to go all out with his Christmas celebration. He decorated the house from top to bottom with tinsel and lights and little plastic snowflakes. Then he bought the biggest Christmas tree he could find and trimmed it up with little glass baubles and red ribbons. He baked mincemeat pie and gingerbread men and little sugar cookies with pieces of cherry on top. He cooked a tasty Christmas ham surrounded by candied sweet potatoes. He wrapped up a big present for Thunder and placed it under the tree. Then he put a fresh log in the fireplace, turned on a CD of his favorite Christmas music, and got dressed up in his Santa Claus suit. Then he opened the basement door and called out, "Merry Christmas, Thunder!" There was no sound from downstairs, so Mr. Jones called out again, "Thunder, it's Christmas Eve, one of the most festive days of the entire year. I have a surprise for you." And still there was no response from the cellar. Mr. Jones was getting a little worried, so he peeked his head down the dark basement stairs and whispered fretfully, "Thunder, are you all right?" For a moment there was no sound at all. Then without warning, the dog flew up the stairs, his eyes red with fury. Thunder looked at the tinsel and the lights and the little plastic snowflakes. He looked at the tree and the present and the baubles and red ribbons. He looked at the mincemeat and the cookies and the fireplace. Then he looked at Mr. Jones, and he glared and stared and bared his teeth and went, and Mr. Jones said, "No, Thunder, no!" But it was too late. In a flash, Thunder bit the Christmas tree in half and smashed the little glass baubles into dust and crushed the tiny plastic snowflakes and the gingerbread men under his big furry feet. He overturned the CD player and ripped a big piece out of the holiday ham. He gobbled down the mincemeat pie and gingerbread men and little sugar cookies in one bite. Then he tore his present to shreds, peed all over the fireplace, and crashed back down the stairs to the dark, cold basement. Mr. Jones was so upset that he was trembling. He hung his head and sighed and fought back a tear. Then he grabbed the shredded present and the broken tree and the half-eaten ham and threw it all out onto the sidewalk. Then he stood at the top of the cellar stairs and said sadly, "Well, Thunder, I guess you hate Christmas too. I try so hard to do nice things for you, and you don't appreciate any of it. Well, I'm fed up. You can live down in your smelly old basement all you want now. I won't bother you again." He stared into the darkness, and his lip quivered for a moment. Then he suddenly shouted, "And by the way, thank you for ruining Christmas." Then he stomped off to his bedroom, slammed the door, and slept a sad and fitful sleep. And the house was quiet for some time, but quiet isn't always good. You see, 2 burglars found the discarded Christmas tree and the half-eaten ham and the demolished present laying in the street. They decided that anyone that could afford to throw away all of their Christmas loot must have tons of money and lots of nice things for stealing. So they very quietly burgled the front door. And then they burgled the television set and the CD player, the silverware and the coin collection and the antique vase and anything else that they thought was worthwhile. They were so busy burgling, in fact, they didn't even notice when a hungry bear, following the smell of the discarded ham and sweet potatoes, ventured up the front steps, in through the open front door, and into the kitchen where it began ransacking the refrigerator for food. The bear feasted on pot roast and mashed potatoes, dill pickles and mayonnaise, spaghetti and meatballs, and a bit of leftover fudge sundae before it was finally full. The sticky, messy bear decided to head home at approximately the same time that the burglars decided they'd burgled just enough, and they all met unexpectedly on their way to the front door. The burglars let out a gasp of alarm, and the bear gave a grunt of surprise, and then everyone stood and stared in silence, not quite knowing what to do next. Then they heard a quiet creaking sound as the basement door slowly swung open. The burglars and the bear turned together and squinted with uneasiness into the darkness, waiting to see what was there. Thunder burst into the room, his mouth foaming with rage. He looked at the burglars and the loot, the bear and the spaghetti sauce and the fudge sundae. Then he glared and stared and bared his teeth and went, The burglars let out a shriek, and the bear let out a howl, but it was all too late. Chaos erupted. Thunder bit the first burglar as the bear chomped the second burglar. Thunder crunched the second burglar as the bear mauled the first burglar. Then Thunder headbutted the bear, bit both burglars in the rear end, gnawed on the bear's nose, peed on the first burglar, pooped on the second burglar, stomped up and down on the bear's face, then tore the couch to shreds, just for good measure. Startled by the noise, Mr. Jones awoke just in time to see the bear and the burglars running for their lives out of the open front door. In the middle of the room, surrounded by the stolen loot and covered in bits of fluff and couch stuffing, was Thunder. He was panting, his tongue was hanging out, his eyes were a little glazed, and he didn't look angry. "Oh, Thunder, whatever have you done?" Thunder looked at the demolished couch and discarded loot, and he looked at Mr. Jones. Then he lay down at his master's feet and went, And then he rolled over on his back and let Mr. Jones rub his belly. "Why, Thunder, you do love Christmas after all," squealed Mr. Jones.
All you needed was a little exercise to get in the mood. Oh, what fun! We'll have to do this every year."
And so a Christmas tradition was born. Every year, Thunder would beat the living daylights out of some burglars and a bear or a wolf or a mountain lion. And then he'd destroy some furniture until he'd gotten all of his aggressions out. Then afterwards, Mr. Jones would make them some snacks, and then he and Thunder would fall asleep, Mr. Jones in his easy chair, and Thunder right beside him in his big fluffy dog bed. The end. Written and read by Shan McFadden. Music by Christian McFadden. Produced by Christian McFadden at the Obtuse Caboose Studios.